I'm going to look at the second tier of running backs here and let you know if I was on the clock, would I draft them or would I not? Hey, before I get into those players though, I got some exciting news to share. Flockfantasy.com/endgame is the ultimate cheat code for your fantasy football season. Put your fantasy football skills to the test by playing redraft against myself and Pierre. Battle us to try to take home cash prizes. And you can ace your draft like a pro with our exclusive video draft course to help you dominate your fantasy drafts. Gain the edge with our top-notch draft rankings plus our weekly in-season rankings. And get access to our secret knowledge with our bonus articles and videos that you cannot find anywhere else. And as a special bonus, you can show off your fantasy skills in style by wearing one of our classy Endgame t-shirts for free just by being a member. Sign up now at flockfantasy.com/endgame and get an amazing 30% off your subscription. So I did this exercise a couple weeks ago with more of the early type running backs, but I wanted to go over the guys who are kind of that second tier, potentially your RB2s in your fantasy draft, and let you know which ones I would draft and which ones I would avoid. And let's start with Travis Etienne, and I'm not going to lie, this is a tough one for me because on the one hand, I see the talent of Travis Etienne. He's an explosive runner. He's got home run potential. He can pick up huge gains at any time. He can be sitting there doing nothing, and then all of a sudden he rips off a 40-yard run, and all of a sudden he's got big numbers. But he wasn't involved very heavily as a pass catcher last year, and we're hearing good things about Tank Bigsby, especially in the passing game. Also, he wasn't used heavily at the goal line either, despite them not really having any other big backs that could take goal line carries last year. So I gotta be honest, I'm really on the fence with Travis Etienne. He's one of those guys where if it was the 4th round and he was my RB2, or maybe he was my RB1 after I went, 3 straight wide receivers, or maybe a tight end and 2 wide receivers, then I'd be okay with him and I think he's a draft. But if you're going to try to take him in the 3rd round, which is where he goes a lot of times, I think that's a little too early given the fact he's not going to have a major pass catching role. I don't see him having massive touchdown upside. I think he'll put up good yardage totals this year, but that only goes so far in fantasy football, especially in your PPR league. So unless he falls to the 4th round, I'm going to say Travis Etienne is going to be an avoid for me most of the time. Then what about Dameon Pierce? Had a very nice rookie season before that injury, was getting decent yardage totals most week, decent touchdown totals. But again, another guy like Etienne just wasn't used in the passing game at all. Really wasn't used on 3rd down at all. And that's what's very worrisome to me because Rex Burkhead got the majority of the 3rd down snaps last year. Rex Burkhead is even on a team right now. I honestly, legitimately don't even know. Will Dameon Pierce suddenly become a 3rd down back, a guy who gets 3rd down snaps? I don't know. It's hard for me to buy into that. I think he is what he is. He's a very good 1st down, 2nd down guy, very good short yardage guy. But I don't know if that's the guy I really want to be counting on in these middle rounds. I think there's just some running backs with way more upside, especially in your PPR leagues. Now, if you're in a standard league, sure, Dameon Pierce should be fine, but in a PPR league, tied to this offense that's maybe going to be better than last year, I mean, almost certainly will be better, but still isn't going to be an elite offense. Without that pass catching, Dameon Pierce, unless he falls very far, is also going to be an avoid for me. What about Miles Sanders? I'm coming around on Miles Sanders. I gotta admit, I've never been a big Miles Sanders guy. I never thought he wasn't a talented runner, but just never got used the way we'd like to see in Philadelphia. Until last year, he got used pretty well, scored 11 touchdowns, had a nice season, then went off and signed with Carolina. All signs are pointing to him being an absolute workhorse in Carolina. And even though you can look back in his Philadelphia days and say, well, he wasn't a big pass catcher, that's because he had Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts had one of the lowest checkdown rates of all quarterbacks last year. It's just not what he does. His eyes are down the field, and if nothing is there, he takes off and runs. He's not looking for the easy dump off to the running back. Now he's in Carolina with a rookie quarterback who I bet will have no problem taking the easy check down to his running back. And Miles Sanders is a good pass catcher. He's a talented runner. He's explosive. He's efficient. And they're going to lean on him because they have a rookie quarterback. So for me, Miles Sanders in these middle rounds, definitely a draft. And then there's Rachaad White, who I loved last year as a rookie. He did technically take over the starting job in Tampa Bay, but never really broke out the way I had hoped or a lot of people had hoped. But there's reasons for optimism this year. I keep talking about it. This guy had 50 catches with Leonard Fournette getting 73. Those 73 catches are gone. Baker Mayfield, check down king, will check it down plenty. So will Kyle Trask. Neither of these guys can throw a deep ball. They're not going to be chucking it down the field. Everything's going to be short, dink and dunk offense. terrible offense. This guy could catch 80 passes. And if he does, in your PPR leagues, in these middle rounds, that's going to be gold at the running back position. It doesn't really matter what he does on the ground, as long as he does adequately on the ground, gives you a handful of touchdowns, he'll be well worth the investment at this cost. So Rachaad White in these middle rounds, in your PPR leagues, definitely a draft for me. And then what about Alexander Mattison? He's seen his stock go way up with Dalvin Cook being released. Everybody looking at what he did in his splits, without Dalvin Cook in the past, just an absolute monster. And that's what they think they're getting. They're getting the steal of the draft in the middle rounds. But kind of like Aaron Jones last year without Davante Adams, you got to look a little bit deeper. It's not going to be the same here. Number one, this offense is totally different than in the past. This is a top 5 passing offense. That's not going to change. They have Jefferson, they have Addison, they have Osborne, they have Hawkinson, and they have a bottom 3 defense. They're going to be one of the pass heaviest teams, so they're not going to rely on the running game. Mattison is just a complete plotter. He's slow. He doesn't do anything exceptionally well. He's not an elite pass catcher. I don't see why people are so high on Mattison. I mean, I do see why, because they just see Dalvin Cook gone and they just instantly think Mattison, or they think, well, he's good enough here. He's going to be a workhorse. I don't even know if he holds on to a workhorse role the entire year. He's just not a good player, not in a good situation. There's better guys to take in this area. So for me, in this area, Mattison isn't a void. And then on the other hand, we have Cam Akers, who isn't a plotter, who actually has some speed. Now, he does also not have an Achilles, which may affect his speed to a degree, and we'll probably never see the best of Cam Akers that we would have seen pre-Achilles. But there's reasons to be encouraged about him this year. Number one, he looked pretty good down the stretch last year. He looked at least close to 100%. And look at a guy like Donta Foreman, who tore his Achilles, and then finally a few years later, last year in Carolina, showed signs of being pretty good. So if we can get Cam Akers back to 80, 90% of what he could have been, that's at least good enough. And we know he's going to be the workhorse here, because who's behind him? Zach Evans, Kyron Williams. There's nobody behind him, and Sean McVay loves Cam Akers. Now, he's not going to catch a ton of passes in this Rams offense, because we know Stafford, another guy who doesn't check it down a ton. Cooper Kupp's going to have a zillion targets. There's not a lot here for Cam Akers in the passing game, but he's going to get all the touches in this backfield. He'll catch enough passes. He has touchdown upside in this offense. In the middle rounds, Cam Akers, definitely a draft for me. Then I think we got to talk about Isiah Pacheco. He seems like a very polarizing player this year. Obviously had a nice finish with the Chiefs last year, took over that backfield. But when you really look at it, he wasn't that good. He was getting you like 13 PPR points a game with a touchdown. Wasn't catching a lot of passes. In fact, barely caught any passes. That's not what he's going to do. He's not a pass catching back. They still have Jerick McKinnon. We're hearing that CEH is still involved. They got Deneric Prince. This is a crowded backfield. It's also an offense that relies heavily on the pass, not on the run, not on the running backs, and especially when they get near the goal line. They don't get near the goal line and say, let's pound the rock 4 times. No, they just keep letting Patrick Mahomes throw the ball, because why not? He's Patrick Mahomes. That's what they should do, and that is what they do. So doesn't have like tremendous touchdown upside. Everybody always thinks Chiefs running back, just crazy touchdown upside in this offense, but he really doesn't. But he does have the upside to rip off big runs. He's got the speed. He's going to face light boxes. He will score some touchdowns. I think he's okay in this range. I don't think he's necessarily a guy where I feel like I have to draft him, but he's also not really a guy where I have to avoid him. So I'm going to take the easy way out and just say push. Another very polarizing player in this range is DeAndre Swift, now with the Eagles. Obviously, his years in Detroit didn't live up to our expectations. This is a very talented guy, had a lot of hype coming out of college, just never really got it going with the Lions. Whether it was injury, in the Dan Campbell doghouse, whatever it was, just couldn't get it going. But he was incredibly efficient when he got his chances. He still had some really nice fantasy games. He was great on the ground, great through the air. One of the most efficient running backs in the entire NFL. And you've got to buy into the opportunity here, because the Eagles went out and traded a 4th-round pick for him. And you might say, it's only a 4th-round pick. But look at the running back market. Jonathan Taylor wanting to get traded. J.K. Dobbins holding out. Saquon Barkley franchise. Josh Jacobs franchise. Tony Pollard franchise. Like, running backs don't command any value anymore. Giving up a 4th-round pick for a running back is a pretty big investment, in my opinion. Now, he's not going to be a workhorse, and that's probably a good thing. Maybe that'll keep him healthier. But he's in one of the best offenses, behind the best offensive line in the NFL. We know what this guy can do. I did talk about the fact that Jalen Hurts won't check it down to him a lot, so we probably can't expect 50, 60, 70, 80 catches, but I think he can get to that 30, 40 catch mark, and with his efficiency, that's enough. On the ground, he could pick up chunks of yardage at any time. He could score touchdowns from pretty much anywhere on the field. So I'm willing to gamble on the upside on DeAndre Swift in these rounds. For me, he's a draft. Then I think we got to talk about Javonte Williams because he's now gone from more of a later round running back to a guy in this range because he's hasn't been on the PUP list and we're getting good reports out of camp that he's running well, whatever that means. I would hope he's running well if he's not on the PUP list, but look, I like Javonte Williams. Last year, I was all over Javonte Williams. I think I had him on my league winners video. I drafted him everywhere I could. Unfortunately, when it finally looked like he was pulling away from Melvin Gordon, he tore his ACL. And he had the worst kind of ACL tear, a multi-ligament tear. He tore 3 tendons in his knee. Basically, his entire knee was destroyed. Now, he's done remarkable to not be on the PUP, to be back on the field. But there's a difference between not being on PUP and being on the field in practice and even being on the field in the game and actually being good. Look at Cam Akers last year. I remember everybody was so excited about Cam Akers. He came back for that Super Bowl run. And even though he was terrible, people were like, well, now he has an offseason. He'll be better. Getting the camp reports. He looks fast. He looks good. And then he was awful. Why? Because it's a serious injury. And Javonte is in the same boat right now. Now, it's not an Achilles, but it's a serious injury. He's still less than a year since surgery. Usually it takes till the second year for these guys to get back to 100%. Like maybe by the end of the season, Javonte is close to good. Maybe. But by then, like you haven't started him for 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks or whatever it is because he's been terrible. Maybe you've dropped him on the waiver. Maybe you traded him away. I don't think he's worth drafting here. I keep saying it. It's like I said with J.K. Dobbins last year. 2023 is not the year I'm going to be drafting Javonte Williams. I will be all over Javonte Williams next year in 2024, assuming they don't do anything at running back like draft somebody or sign somebody. But not this year. For me, he's in a void. And then finally, I want to talk about a running back that I haven't talked about much this offseason. I haven't really heard people talking about that much, and that is David Montgomery. All the hype is going to Jahmyr Gibbs, but don't forget about David Montgomery. He's getting paid pretty good money by the Lions, and he's a guy still young, still low on touches. He can be a productive starting running back in the NFL. We know this. And the thing about Jahmyr Gibbs, I keep saying, is he wasn't used between the tackles in college. He wasn't used in the goal line at college. That's not going to change at the NFL level. That's not what he's built for. He's going to be a weapon in the passing game. They're going to use him on like outside runs, maybe in like long yardage situations where there's a lot of DBs on the field. He'll pick up his yardage, but David Montgomery is going to be the early down back. He's going to be the goal line back. This is a great offensive line. This is an emerging offense. This is a well-run ship here in Detroit. You gotta like David Montgomery. No, he's not going to catch a ton of passes because Jahmyr Gibbs, although I think he will catch more than people think. But he's got tremendous touchdown upside. He's got decent yardage upside. Where you're getting him here as a low-end RB2, maybe even an RB3, I think it's worth it. He's a draft. So that's how I'm feeling about some of those tier 2 running backs. But if you want to see my opinion on the tier 1 running backs, check out this video right here.